Hey everyone, Andrew here. So it is Star Wars month because we had May the 4th be with you and Revenge of the 5th. I wasn't actually planning to do this for this reason. I recorded something else entirely, but I've been wanting to do this ranking for a while because I am a huge Star Wars fan. I absolutely love it. Got my DJ Rex shirt right here. I think that Star Wars is, to me, one of the best sci-fi series of all time. The original trilogy is up there with some of my favorite films of all time. I love them, and I have opinions on them. And of course, my opinions are dramatically different than the majority of people's opinions on them. Which is why this is going to be my ranking. It's not just the rankings. Because I can tell you right now, I am not a huge fan of the prequels. My favorite of the prequels and my least favorite are the reverse of a lot of people's. I don't think the Disney ones are that bad, and my order for the top of the original trilogy is also a little different than some people's. So, yeah, this is gonna be a fun list where y'all yell at me in the comments because you don't agree. It is the Star Wars way, unfortunately. Being a Star Wars fan and talking about Star Wars is like walking into the cantina as a droid. You're not wanted, and we won't serve your kind here. But I'm going to do this anyway because I want to and I love it. So I'm going to be looking at the Star Wars films today. I was considering doing a list that included all of the TV shows and where I rank them, but I haven't seen a lot of them, and some of them are still in the works and aren't fully finished yet. And there's certain ones of the shows where I'm just like, I don't have any desire or interest to watch that. Like, I'm sorry, I don't see any reason to ever bother with Resistance or Forces of Destiny or anything like that. But today I will be reviewing the 14 Star Wars films. I am going to be including some that aren't technically canon, including made-for-TV ones. Let's get going. Today I'll be ranking the Star Wars films from worst to best. Number 15. Star Wars fandom, we all have different opinions, different thoughts. There's not a lot of things that we can agree on or approve or that. I think we all agree that the original trilogy is still the best. Other than that, we all have different opinions and different thoughts. I think the only other thing all Star Wars fans can agree on and should agree on is that the worst thing in all of Star Wars is the holiday special. Now, this one doesn't technically count because it is not a film. It was a made-for-TV holiday special at the height of its popularity after the original, and Lucas was involved, but not really. That is all true, but it's also still the worst thing in all of Star Wars and needs to be acknowledged for that because, my God, is this unwatchable. Lucas was right to try and erase this from existence because no one needs to watch. This is just torture to watch. Now, this is easily the worst thing in all of Star Wars. You cannot tell me anything and any of the Disney Star Wars stuff is worse than the first 10 minutes of the holiday special. 10 minutes where we see 3 Wookiees we've never met before, speaking only in Wookieese with no subtitles, and so it's just 10 minutes of not my best, but mind-numbingly bad. Like, it is so terrible. And then just so many bad choices throughout the entire thing. Chewie's grandfather, known as Itchy, watch a film that is clearly sexual in its tone, with him being seduced by a human woman. Ugh, and then just the songs and the bad scenes and the bad effects. You have the entire circus performance that takes over like a good 20 minutes. Luke Skywalker in eye mascara for no reason. Princess Leia looks like she's drunk and doesn't want to be there. Literally, the only good thing that even remotely comes out of this special is it is the introduction to Boba Fett in this animated short. And even that is not good. Like, it's really slow, really badly animated. Doesn't really do a good job of setting up who Boba Fett is or why we should care. Like, it is a travesty. It is a thing that shouldn't exist, but it is also a thing that as a Star Wars fan you have to see at least once because it is Star Wars at its worst, and it really should reset your mind on how bad Star Wars could be. Number 14. And this is where we start off the controversy right away, because I'm not a big fan of the prequels, and my favorite of the prequels is one y'all don't like, and my least favorite is Revenge of the Sith. Now, I will give it to this. It's visually stunning. It has good fights. I just hate everything else about it. Like, literally, I think the one thing in the entire thing of this that I like is that opera scene where Darth Sidious explains this way of the Sith to Anakin Skywalker. But I hate so much about this film. The terrible way it's written, the terrible, storytelling, the characters don't work well or make sense. It's so boring and frustrating, and it's just a slog to watch. So I really enjoy emoting to films. I like getting invested and involved with these kinds of films. Like, if I can connect to your film emotionally, it's a good chance that I'm going to enjoy it and watch it over and over and over again. I can't connect to this film. Like, I've tried. For me, it's like watching paint dry. It's just so devoid. Like, the only character I can connect to in any way is Anakin, and I spend the entire film trying not to do that because I know what's coming. I know he's going to betray them. I know he's going to go evil, and I don't want to be connected to that. And, my God, going from the, I just want to save my wife to immediately turning full evil and murdering younglings. Now, to be fair, the Clone Wars animated series does a lot to rectify this and have it make more sense and have it be more of the steady, ongoing thing. But we are intended to watch these as just movie trilogy. And as the movie trilogy, this is the one I cannot stand to watch. It is literally the only one of the main 9 trilogy. It's the only one I don't own, because I have no desire to really ever watch it or give it my interest. I try. Every couple of years I come back to it hoping I will get more out of it, or it'll be just more engaging or more this, that, and the other, but I can't. It has some stuff in it that's great. I love seeing Kashyyyk and the Wookiees fighting. I like some of the battles. But at the end of the day, it's the only one that I just get zero enjoyment out of watching at all. I know most of you will disagree with it, but this is my list, and I'm putting this one here. Number 13, The Clone Wars. This is the animated film that is intended to be the introduction to the Clone Wars animated show when they switched over from the Tarkovsky's hand-drawn style to the more 3D CGI style that the TV show became. And that show went on to be very good. This film, however, is pretty awful. Like, you get the introduction of Ahsoka into the series. Even that isn't great because they make her out to be an incredibly annoying little brat that you just want Anakin to kick off a bridge. Like, she is so whiny and so annoying in this. Like, they do explain where she gets her nickname from him, which is Snips, and that's because she kept snipping at him the entire time they were talking. And then you get introduced to the greatest character in all of Star Wars, Stinky the Hutt. Jabba the Hutt's son that they spend the entire film rescuing. Honestly, I'd rather believe that Pizza the Hutt from Spaceballs is related to Jabba more than Stinky. The second half of the film is entirely centered around rescuing Stinky the Hutt, who's been kidnapped by one of the other Hutts to take power away from Jabba. And Anakin and Ahsoka have to go rescue Stinky the Hutt. And of course he smells because he's Stinky the Hutt. Like, it's awful. It's a terrible way to introduce what is actually a great series. Like, if you haven't watched it, go watch the Clone Wars. It is legitimately the best part of the prequels. Honestly, I'd also recommend the Bad Batch. Bad Batch is pretty good. But the Clone Wars film is terrible and not worth your time. Number 12, Ewoks: The Battle for Endor. Now, I'm counting both of the Ewok films. Both of them are going to be fairly low on this list, although surprisingly not the lowest. But with the Ewoks: Battle for Endor, the majority of this film is annoying kid with grumpy old man. And there's ways to do that it can be really interesting. Look at The Last of Us. Look at Logan. But you have to have that kid have something that's kind of redeemable about this, whereas the little girl in this one is just whiny and annoying. And I will give this film some praise, as it was a made-for-TV kids film that started with all of her family dying. Like, literally, the people we spent the entire last film trying to save and rescue, all of them are killed, including her brother, leaving us with just her. And that is the start of this is really good. There's some really nice practical effects. But then you get introduced to Walter Matthau's character. Walter Matthau is this grumpy old man who wants nothing to do with this little girl and is stuck taking care of her and doesn't want to. And then you have the villain and his desire for this power item that he doesn't even remotely understand. And the entire film feels more like a bad fantasy film than a Star Wars film. Like, they're using blasters, but nothing about this really screams Star Wars. It's one that, like, you can respect it because they went so balls to the walls. Killing off an entire family at the beginning of the film for a kid's film is pretty ballsy, but it's a boring film that just has nothing in it that really makes it worth watching more than once. 11. Solo: A Star Wars Story. This was a film that nobody needed. Nobody even really wanted it. It reminds me a lot of Madam Web from this year, where it's just like the studio kept going, you want this, and the fans kept going, no we don't, and they kept shoving it in our face. But with Madam Web, nobody wanted it. Solo, a couple of us did. Like, I honestly did not have a huge problem with the Solo story as a concept, but the reality is, you really don't want to see anyone but Harrison Ford as that character. I did not have a problem with the new casting of Han Solo. He's fine. He does a good job with what he's given. Problem for me with this film is the fact it is shot incredibly dark. And I don't mean its tone. I mean it's literally filmed in the dark. Like, it's so hard to tell what's going on or any of the plot of this and keep track of what's going on. There's also just a whole bunch of really dumb choices in this. Like, where does Han get his last name from? Well, he was alone, so we called him Han Solo. Okay, and this is how he got the Millennium Falcon, and this is what the Kessel Run was. And here's the thing. I could see a really easy way to salvage this film is you could have just made a Kessel Run film, make it a heist film. Like, you get a criminal, you could have even had Woody Harrelson be that criminal mastermind who's like, there's a thing at the end of the Kessel Run that we want to steal, and then we need to make that run, and he gets a crew together, and he comes up with a big plan, and we do a very, like, Ocean's 11 elaborate plan, and then you bring in Han and Chewie as either, like, the pilot, and they provide the ship, or even what he did in this one of having be the subordinate who ends up becoming the pilot. If that had been the focus, and not just been, we need to focus on Han and his love story with this random new girl named Kira who's has nothing going for her whatsoever. Like, she has no personality and nothing to like about her. And they didn't even do a good job of explaining why the Kessel Run was important, or why him saying, he did it in 12 parsecs was a big deal. But there's some good in this one, I will give it. Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian is amazing.
It's true. Everything you've heard about me is true.
I honestly would not mind him coming back in some form as that character. I love his robot companion and her fighting for, the freedom of droid kind was really great. But then they kill her off and she just becomes the navigating computer for the Falcon. Like, why? Like, it's just such a weird, stupid thing to include in this. It's one of those ones where you want to know what the original version looked like, because originally this was a Lord and Miller film, the guys that made Lego Movie and then went on to make Into the Spider-Verse franchise, and then they got fired and got replaced by Ron Howard, and Ron Howard did this whatever this is, and I just wonder what the Lord and Miller version was like, because I have to believe it was at least a little bit better than this. That, this film did so poorly that they decided they're just not going to do Star Wars films for a while. And, yeah, I can see why. There's some salvageable stuff in this. It's got a decent cast. I like a lot of the characters in it. But it's just not a story anybody wanted, and it's not told in a way that's really well done. And I'm honestly kind of glad that this stopped Star Wars films for a little bit. Like, if we should only do Star Wars films if there's a story worth telling. But then they just slammed Disney Plus with a whole bunch of shows. So they didn't really learn anything, did they? Number 10, Attack of the Clones. This film is okay. It has some tonal problems. It has some stuff in it that doesn't work. It has some good action bits. Like, the whole last chunk of this film is actually pretty decent once all of them get captured, and it does a good job of introducing the clones and getting that started. You get introduced to Jango Fett, who's an interesting character who I wish we could do more with. Like, I'd like more about that character. The couple problems I have with this is, first off, you have the terrible love story between Anakin and Padme, which, in all honesty, is not their fault. It's not the actor's fault. It is the directing. It is the way it is written. It is also the fact that they had to dub over every single line of dialogue in this film. So they're coming to this after the fact and trying to re-add in these lines, and they just didn't have good vocal people to teach them to give them these lines emotions and make it work. But for me, the biggest problem I have with this film is the way it is shot and how they cut between scenes. Like, because it'll go from bright sunny desert planet, dark rainy planet, bright sunny desert planet, dark rainy planet, and it'll hard cut between them. And I have light sensitivity, so flashing lights like that gives me a migraine. So watching this film literally gives me migraines, and I still kind of like it more than Revenge of the Sith, because I at least can connect to some of this and care about some of this plot. But yeah, it is a film that hurts for me to watch, literally. Number 9, The Ewok Adventure Caravan of Courage. This is the first of the Ewok films. It involves basically a shuttle crashed, and these two kids got separated from their families, and they got taken in by the Ewoks and are trying to figure out where their family is, but also trying to survive. It's primarily focused on the annoying little girl and her big brother, who's constantly like pushing against the Ewoks and doesn't want to get involved with them. I really enjoy this film to an extent. Like, the little girl, she still has her moments of being terrible, but she's not nearly as bad. I like the older brother character. I like the interactions with the Ewoks and having that stuff, and them fighting the big monster at the end. This is just a fun, simple kids film. This is one of those films where it's like, it's not a good film by any stretch, but it has that old Star Wars feel to it, so it feels a lot like the old films in the original trilogy, so it has this level of charm that I just enjoy about it. It's not a good film by any stretch, but it is a film that I do find myself wanting to watch every once in a while. I'm also glad that Disney doesn't like erase it from history like they try to do with some other films. Like, the fact that you can watch both of the Ewok films and Tarkovsky's Clone Wars on Disney Plus is amazing to me. You would think they would try to deny those exist as hard as they could, you know, like they do with Song of the South. But it's still nice to see like it gets some representation. You're not missing anything if you haven't seen it, but it's a film that I still connect to and still have feelings about, that I enjoy it. I don't think it's amazing, but I think it's good. Number 8, The Phantom Menace. And this is easily my favorite of the prequels. It's the first Star Wars film I saw in theaters. I was old enough, though, not to be, you know, that's not the reason I love this film. I don't have this strong attachment because I saw it in theaters as a kid. Like, no. Because even when I went and saw this in theaters as a kid, I was like, you know, this is okay. I like parts of it, but there's still something off about it. I like this film for a number of reasons. I acknowledge it has a lot of flaws. It has a lot of trade disputes. It has a lot of talking. But it also has a lot of great stuff in it. We got pod racing, which was fun and interesting. You have Darth Maul and the battle with him, which is still among some of the best fighting in all of Star Wars. And, you know, having the Duel of the Fates song from that is amazing. Anakin Skywalker, while being annoying in this one, is a likable kid enough. He does a decent enough job with it. Like, I think Jake Lloyd did great with what he was given. He is not the problem. Granted, everything with him flying the ship and the last act is a bit much, but they had to give him something to do. Like, they couldn't just let him just be in the background. But I thought it had some great stuff in it. I liked having the old Yoda puppet for the original productions, but then adding in the CGI one works fine enough. They did a great job of introducing Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan. Like, Qui-Gon Jinn is still one of the strongest Jedi performances in the entire franchise, and he's in one film, but he's still, like, he's what you think of when you think of Jedi. The introduction to the young Obi-Wan with Ewan McGregor, who just does an amazing performance throughout the prequels. He's the best thing in all of the prequels. Like, it's got some great action in it. It's got some good storytelling in it. It does a decent enough job building the world where you're interested and intrigued. It does have some really dull, boring parts in it, unfortunately. And then you have the whole Jar Jar Binks thing, which, yeah, Jar Jar Binks is annoying. He's meant to be the comic relief. I think he's also meant to be a bit annoying. I think they just couldn't figure out the balance of how to make this character annoying but also funny. He was trying to be the modern take on the Ewoks, like the thing that little kids could connect to and associate and be like, oh, cool, Jar Jar, we love Jar Jar. And the reality is nobody liked him for that. We were all just like, oh, go away. And let me know in the comments, like, what was worse, the Ewoks or Jar Jar? Because Jar Jar to me is way worse than the Ewoks ever were. I don't hate Jar Jar Binks. I don't have this, deep despising of him. I think he was just a poorly made character. I think the actor did a good job. I just don't think Lucas really thought through this. I think he was just like, well, we need something to lighten the tone, so he came up with this character. Yeah, it doesn't also help that, the whole racial undertones between Jar Jar Binks' voice and then the trade people's clearly Jewish-inspired voices. Like, it's problematic, but it's also the only one of the prequels that I actually would go back and watch for fun. Like, it's one of the only ones that I actually get any kind of real enjoyment out of watching. It doesn't hold a candle to the originals, but it has its moments that make it alright. Number 7, The Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, so I prefer all of the Disney Skywalker's trilogy over the prequels. I just think they were better put together films with a bit more compellingness to them. The prequels have been over-analyzed and over-thought of and over-watched by Star Wars fans to the point that they've convinced themselves these are good films. And I don't agree or think that. I think they are still terrible films. I don't care that they patch well together, this and the other. There's still so many stupid and bad things about them. Where there are stupid and bad things in these ones as well, but I think that there's still stuff in this that makes them a bit more salvageable than the prequels. Like, I'm the first to admit they're all flawed, especially Rise of Skywalker, because Rise of Skywalker was them trying to pivot so hard away from what The Last Jedi did that they overcorrected and went way too far in the other direction. They just made some really terrible choices all around, starting with the first line of the film, "The dead speak. Palpatine somehow survived." Here's the thing, I honestly think we could have done Palpatine surviving and having a way and making it work, but the choosing to introduce it that way and that bluntly and that annoyingly was just the dumbest way possible to introduce this. Imagine the film like this. We still keep Kylo Ren showing up with the little wayfinder. He goes to this planet, he meets this person, and you just see him, you don't hear the person, but you see him go down on his knees and be like, "Yes, master, I will do thy bidding." And then we don't see who it is, we don't hear them, and then we just keep kind of the film going the way it sort of does, but at the part way through then we reveal that it is Palpatine. And then I would also make it way more obvious how Palpatine is alive. And that by doing so, I mean making him way more screwed up. Like, him just being in that device thing that was holding him up is not enough. I would have had it, like, they should have prosthetically, like, cut off half of his face and had it be, like, robotic or, like, melted in or caved in or something to make it more clear that this is not being alive. This is just, like, the rotting corpse of Palpatine that is refusing to go on to the other side. They tried, but they didn't take it quite far enough. The one thing I will recommend with this, the Rise of Skywalker, is there is a documentary that comes with it, which you can watch on Disney+. It's called Skywalker Legacy. It talks about the making of this film and what thoughts and what they did to do that. And it shows how it ties into the original and does such a great job of explaining to you what this film was meant to be and what they were going for and how much effort and how much love and how much stuff they put into it. Because this is a film to me that feels like they are like 3 feet from gold and they just started digging in the wrong direction. They could have easily, I think, salvaged this and made this a great capper to the entire trilogy. But they were so paranoid and so worried and had so many hands in the pot that this. I do highly recommend that documentary. It is legitimately better than the film it is based off of. I still think this film has its merits. I still think it has stuff in it that works out fairly well. I love bringing back Lando Calrissian. I like all of those shuttles showing up to help save them all at the end. I love what they did with Kylo Ren and his salvation and this stuff. I think his redemption arc in this works actually fairly well and is very interesting. And one of the things, though, that does drive me nuts and I really hated, like, so they gave Rey the ability to do force healing, which isn't a terrible thing. Like, they explain well enough that she got it from one of the Jedi books, and because of what she is, she has the ability to use this. I don't mind that. I just don't like the way they used it at the end, which is that she died taking out Palpatine, and then Kylo Ren shows up, uses the force healing to revive her. They both stare at each other for a moment, then she leans forward, kisses him, and then he dies immediately. And it's like, we didn't need that scene just drags and doesn't work, and it's just, that kiss adds a level of like, ugh, to the whole thing. What should have happened is he should have healed her, and before she even got up, he should have slumped over dead. Like, it should have been immediate. Building up them as a love couple of any kind just did not work in the show whatsoever. They very much, like, it almost could have worked with The Last Jedi, but it's still, they have a weird, almost brother-sister kind of feel to them. It just kind of doesn't really work. And, yeah, like, her calling herself Rey Skywalker at the end of the film is just, it's such a dumb way to end the film. Like, I never liked the whole her being a Palpatine to begin with, and then her just taking the Skywalker name for no reason. Literally, she should have said just Rey. She didn't have to say Palpatine. Like, some people say that she should have said Rey Palpatine. I'm like, no, she should have said just Rey, and just been her own new line. I don't think this is a masterpiece by a long shot. I think it has a lot of flaws. I think it has maybe more flaws than some of the prequels, but I think it's a better held together film than some of the prequels. But again, my opinion, you don't have to agree with that. Number 6, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. So, I'm split on this film. I really love half of the film, and I don't like the other half of the film. I can't stand the first chunk of this film. Like, I like the very beginning, you know, when you see Mads Mikkelsen's character hiding his daughter and getting taken and all that. That's fine, but when you get to, like, Andor being introduced as the spy who's willing to kill to complete his mission, like, they brought in Forrest Whitaker to play this super important, amazing character, and then they just give him nothing to work with. All of the stuff before they actually try to go and steal the Star Wars plan, all of that stuff, I don't like. I don't like most of it. I don't think it's interesting. I don't think it's funny. I find it really boring, really. I loved the visuals of it. I loved seeing the Death Star destroy that planet, and seeing it from the ground level was really great. I hate bringing back Grand Moff Tarkin in that way, because it never looks right. And even when it does sort of look right, we know it's not right, so we automatically start making it blurrier in our vision. But it's also that thing of, like, you could have easily done that without showing him. Like, Grand Moff Tarkin has a distinct hairline. You could have literally shown the back of somebody's head and then just had someone who sounds like him speaking, and we could have gotten the information across without it. Like, it's a cheap Hollywood technique to get around not having the actor in it, but I will take cheap Hollywood techniques over ridiculously expensive CGI that doesn't look real even in the slightest bit. And then it's slow, it's uninteresting, it's so dragged on and that. But then, once they decide that they're going to go and find the Death Star plans and steal them, the show becomes amazing. Like, that third act with the fighting and all of the, sneaking into the base, but also fighting on the beaches. Like, there's just so much in this that works so well in that last half. And that scene with Darth Vader fighting his way through that hallway is just, like, Star Wars at its best. And it just is the same to me because I just cannot stand the rest of the film before that. And I love the downer ending. Like, that is how this film should have ended. And I'm glad they chose that and then that they all survive somehow. Like, no, it makes perfect sense. Of course, then they end on the imperfect note of having a look-alike Princess Leia, and she looks even worse than Grandma Tarkin did. But, it is a thing. It is what it is. But it's still a really great way to end a film that, for the majority of it, wasn't my cup of tea. Number 5, The Last Jedi. The most controversial in all of Star Wars. I thought it was okay. I thought it made some really bad choices, but I thought it had some really good ideas and really good concepts. The things that everyone complains about from this one are not the stuff that ever bothered me about this. Everyone complained about, like, Luke getting the lightsaber and tossing it over his shoulder. And I'm, like, sitting there, like, when I watched it in theaters and he was holding the lightsaber after she handed it to it, I said, you know what would make my day is if he just tossed it over his shoulder like it meant nothing. And he did. And I was laughing so hard in the aisle. Like, people were mad because Luke cut himself off from the Force and was this super downer Jedi guy. And it's like, he doesn't live up to what we expected, and we wanted him to be like, did it. And I'm like, did you guys not watch Force Awakens? He'd been missing for years. Han died in the last one. Luke would have shown up to save him because, he did that before in Empire. Like, when he felt his friends were in trouble, he showed up. Like, if Luke was still connected to the Force and still using his powers, he would have shown up once the First Order started. This filming would not happen. Like, him cutting himself off from the Force legitimately makes sense to me. The fact that he left and hasn't returned and hasn't been heard from, and no one knows where he went, tells you something went wrong, and he is doing everything in his power to not be involved with the universe. Like, I wish they'd given it a better reason than just, I failed one of my students and had a moment where I gave in to my darkness, and that led to all of my students being killed. Like, they could have figured that explanation out a bit better. He could have been having these nightmares and these visions about what Ben Solo was going to do for, like, months. And he had this moment of weakness, and that moment of weakness destroyed everything around him. So him cutting himself off from the Force makes sense to me. And then you have the whole scene with him milking a creature and drinking the milk, which is just gross for the sake of being gross, and it was unnecessary in any way, shape, or form. Like, the explanation would be, we are trying to show how he's managed to survive on this island, to which I say, who cares? He's Luke Skywalker, and it's a area with a bunch of birds and fish. I'm sure he can figure it out. I know a lot of people didn't like the porgs because they were clearly there to sell product, which, no, they were actually made to hide all the freaking regular birds that were on the filming location. I don't have a problem with the porgs. I have a problem with the fish people living on the island, because their entire existence, and the only reason they exist in the story, is to give Rey dirty looks when she screws up. Like, that's their entire plot significance is, oh, Rey did something stupid, we're gonna give her a dirty look. And then you had the whole casino planet and all that stuff, and that felt so much like the prequels, and it just kind of dragged the whole thing down. But I still thought this had some really good action scenes, some really good fight scenes. The Kylo versus Luke in the sand planet was actually amazing, and there's, like, little things that you can tell during the entire thing where you're like, oh yeah, he's definitely not there. I'm like, I knew it the second he pulled out the lightsaber, because I'm sitting there going, isn't that the one that just broke in half like 5 minutes earlier? Like, how does he have that lightsaber? I'm the first to admit there are a lot of stupid, bad decisions in this film. I think some of the arguments that were trying to be made were correct. I liked Rey not having parents that were important, because it makes more sense for the universe. Being the best Jedi shouldn't be dependent on who your bloodline is. Like, that is not how the Force should work. Because the way that it should work, the way that it should be, is that the Force picks the person who is the best suited to fix the situation and make the universe better. Like, the reason that Luke became the chosen one was because he was the only one that could reach his father. But you didn't need a familiar connection to solve this story. That Rey could have stayed as a nobody, and it would have worked fine. Making her a Palpatine did not improve Last Jedi. It actually actively made it worse. They were trying to make a thing that messed with our preconceptions of what Star Wars is and what Star Wars should be. To an extent, I get that and I understand it. I get why also people didn't like that, because we like the things that we like about Star Wars. We don't want to abandon all of them. We don't want to be told we're stupid for liking the things that we like. That is really insulting, you know? If we just want remakes of the original trilogy, they'll just keep making us remakes. We have to ask for more and expect more from them. Granted, then they did this, and nobody liked it. Except for me. And I didn't even love it. I just liked most of it. It's good. It's not amazing. I 100% get the people that don't like it. I think that this was a decent attempt to try to steer Star Wars into a different area. And because fans reacted so badly to that, they steered way too hard back in the other direction and made something even worse. Number 4, Star Wars The Force Awakens. I legitimately liked this film. I thought it was great. I thought it had some really good characters, really good ideas. The cast is stellar. It had some real, like, jaw-dropping, I'm so happy to see this in a film moments. Like them fighting in the Millennium Falcon over Jakku and flying around. I just remember being like blown away in the theaters. Like, I was so happy to see that on the big screen in that way, with those effects, bringing back the original cast, bringing back Han and Leia in the way that they did, and adding these new characters who are all kind of interesting. The addition of Kylo Ren, who is legitimately, he's in my top 2 favorite characters in all of Star Wars. It's like Kylo and Yoda are my top favorite characters in all of Star Wars. He's such a great character and so interesting. A lot of people bag on him because he's just this wimpy white guy underneath the helmet, and I'm like, no, that actually works perfectly, because he's a poser. He's a guy who wants to be Darth Vader, but isn't. Like, that works so well, and also explains, like, his temper tantrums and why he would just start smashing things up with his lightsaber. And I still, like, his lightsaber is still freaking amazing to me. I love that design. The one negative you can really give Force Awakens is it is just a rehash of A New Hope. To which I'm like, yeah, they kind of needed to do that. Like, the prequels were just so different and so bad that Disney, before they were even allowed to try and make their own kind of film about that, had to show that they could even come close to something like the original. They had to show the fans that they understood what Star Wars was, what it was about, and that they could create an up-to-date retelling, new version of Star Wars that both respected the original trilogy, but also moved it forward into being its own kind of thing. I think they did a really good job with that one for this film, and then I think they fumbled it for the next 2. That is Disney's fault. They didn't plan this out. They didn't really consider anything that they were doing. They were just like, we spent the money on this. We want to make a profit. We want to show the fans that this is where Star Wars is, this is what Star Wars can be, and this is what we're building. And so we got The Force Awakens, which I think is great and fun and energetic and is the closest to the original trilogy that any of the Star Wars anything ever really got. Number 3, The Empire Strikes Back. Yeah, this is one that I've always disagreed with people on. I still think it's an amazing film. I absolutely do love this film. So here's the top 3 are all like this. They're all basically at roughly the same level. I think they're all basically perfect. Like, they're so close to, like, the best things ever made. They're just amazing, immaculate, and it's just a matter of preferences and a matter of choices. And unfortunately, I have never particularly loved the tone of Empire Strikes Back, because it is that darker tone, because it is that more slightly depressing story, and because it is very much the middle of a story, with New Hope and Return and even like Phantom Menace and some of the other one, it's like if the story just stopped, you would feel like it would be complete enough. This one, if they never made Return, you would always feel wanting. You would always feel incomplete. And it's kind of slow in the middle, like just a bit. Things that I do love is like this is the first one you get Darth Vader's theme and the Imperial March. This first, you get the introduction of Yoda, who's one of my favorite characters of all time, and I love Yoda in this film. I love the way the fights go. I love opening scenes in Hoth. I love the battles at the end. There's just so many great things in this. Honestly, even the fact that it has a darker tone, but it is very much the middle of a story. It's fine. It is what it is, but it is definitely a thing that keeps it from being my favorite. Like, I love it. I still think it's amazing, but I honestly prefer the other two in that trilogy more. Number 2, Star Wars A New Hope. Or as I call it, Star Wars. Because I still have the old VHSs. And I'm not switching over to DVDs unless I absolutely have to, or unless you release the original cuts. Because of all of the things that Lucas did, his remasters and adding all of those special effects totally butcher the first film. The only thing I've ever seen where they were like, people were making the argument that this is better in the special editions, was the bringing in the actual look of what the Emperor should look like into Empire Strikes Back. That's the only one that I was ever like, yeah, this is okay. But all of them, all the ones that he added special edition stuff for, New Hope is the one that gets hurt the most by these special editions. Like, they are all just garish and blocking scenes and add nothing. The entire scene with Jabba the Hutt is completely unnecessary, unneeded, and it doesn't do a good job of setting up what Jabba the Hutt looks like. Because, like, how did he go from someone being roughly Han's height to being this giant guy in the sixth? And everything that they talk about in there was literally covered in the previous scene when he was talking to Guido. I'm someone who supports the theatrical cut. Han shot first. I will always argue it doesn't matter. Even if Guido shot first, if he missed at that range, he gets what's coming to him. Because, geez Louise, anyone that misses at point blank range deserves what's coming next. Of all the things in Star Wars to fight over, like, that's not fun. That's worth the effort. But still, this is the first one. It is the thing that starts us on this adventure. It's the thing that gets us going with it. And is still, to me, one of the best ways of telling that story and showing off that story. You get your introduction to your villain with that great entrance from Vader walking in and just immediately setting a tone and a presence. You got great comedy characters in C-3PO and R2-D2. You have a great young kid on the journey to becoming a hero. You have the great wisdom figure of Obi-Wan Kenobi in that. You got the great scoundrel character in Han, in that trench run at the end. Like, my gosh, that's still one of the best set pieces, action scenes of all time. Just amazing. It is such a great idea, such a great storytelling. If there had been no other Star Wars film, if this had been the only Star Wars film ever made, this would still be one of the best sci-fi films of all time. That's really, I think, that makes the original trilogy stand out as much as it is because there are just so many layers on it that we only get to see just a bit of, but you can sense, you can feel the world has so much more to it. And that's, I think, the thing that always makes Star Wars interesting is that there's always so much more to tell. Number 1 is, of course, Return of the Jedi. Yes, again, another controversial pick. Of my most favorite of the original trilogy is everyone else's least favorite. I love Return of the Jedi. I think it's just amazing. I think it's just the perfect culmination of this story and the way they told it and all these elements to it. Like, you get the whole opening chunk, getting to see Jabba the Hutt and that full design, getting to see the Rancor and the Rancor pit. Even the little scene where you have R2-D2 and C-3PO going through the droid area and you're seeing these droids getting tortured. You're just like, wow. It's got so much life and so much energy and so much stuff into it. Everyone's first crush was Leia in the gold bikini. I'm sorry. She was. It's iconic. And then having Luke and show up and take down the Rancor without even his lightsaber, just through his wits and his intelligence, and then that whole fight on the barge above the Sarlacc pit. Yes, Boba Fett gets taken out like a punk, but If nothing had happened to Boba Fett, if Boba Fett had just somehow survived or just gotten shot, like, it was literally because he had a dumbass ending that allowed him to somehow maybe survive. Nobody would have cared as much if he had just, like, been shot by Han, and instead, because he died in such a stupid way, he became cooler. He became so much more interesting. Then you get to Endor and the Ewoks, and yep, there's a thing that's been said for many years. It's a matter of what age you are when you watch this. If you were like an adult and you watched this, you hate the Ewoks, and if you were a kid, you love the Ewoks, and I love the Ewoks. And I definitely saw this as a kid. Even as an adult, I can look at it and say, like, these characters are a personification of nature. They are a personification of innocence. Like, they are primitive, childlike people that are just trying to survive, and the stormtroopers are there destroying their world. And so them teaming up with our heroes to go and fight this battle works really well. Like, yes, them having the advantage is a little disbelievable, but first off, we have history where this stuff like this literally happened. Plus, this was their planet. The group that they were going against was a small contingent of stormtroopers. This was not an army of any size, and they had time to plan, and they knew the area. So you can't tell me that these Ewoks hadn't already set up a lot of these traps already with plans to do something. But even if they built them in the night, they're all small, tiny, and they can see in the dark. Like, they can easily have done all this in one night. Like, if nothing else, I will give Ewoks all the love in the world because it was the first role of Warwick Davis. Go and watch any of his interviews from that time or about getting that part. He is the happiest person in the entire world.
Well, it's fun, really. Yeah, it's great fun.
Mum then said that I was a big fan of the films and that I was only 11. We could have some sort of younger Ewoks.
Yeah. To get to play Wicket and be in Star Wars, and that makes them all worth it, from my opinion. Him showing up for, like, with his own son in Rise of Skywalker is this highlight of Rise of Skywalker that I absolutely love. Then you have all of the stuff on the Death Star between Vader and Luke and Palpatine, and it's just so well done and so interesting. And Palpatine just has this air of being a threat without even really having to do much. Like, he does eventually start using the lightning thing, but even just him sitting in the chair with the lightsaber, he's just like, oh, you want your weapon back? Take it. He's not scared. And then even when they cross lightsabers in front of him, he's not scared. He's excited. Like, yes, fight for me. Flying through the Death Star to get to the core, to blow it up. It's just amazing. And then you have the ending with Luke being, attacked by Palpatine and Vader choosing to save his son, and him releasing his hate and releasing his thing and doing the one good thing in his life, rescuing his son and saving the universe as a result, is just a great finale. I have to mention one thing because this always pisses me off because people bring this up all the time. The helmets that the Ewoks are playing do not have skulls in them. They are empty. They would not make these drum noises if they had skulls in them. Plus, there's no way in hell Han and Leia let these Ewoks eat the stormtroopers. Yes, the Ewoks are definitely cannibals who will eat a person, because they were totally going to eat Luke and Han, but there's no way in heck they let them eat those stormtroopers. No, they were probably arrested and added into the main ships. That's just something everyone brings up, and it pisses me off. Like, no, they did not eat the stormtroopers. And I still like the original ending where you have, the Yub Nub song playing, and you have the actor that was playing de-helmeted Vader show up in his ghostly form and not Hayden Christensen, because that's just really dumb. Because if you're going to do that, then why not just have Ewan McGregor as his Force Ghost to do that? I get why, because it ties in to show off the Anakin as we knew him, but I will always be the guy that prefers the theatrical cut. I hate the special editions. I hate the fact that they don't give us the choice to pick which one we get. I keep waiting for Disney to release it as like an HD 4D collection thing. But so that is my rankings for Star Wars from best to worst. What do you all think? I assume most of you disagree with me. I 100% understand. Please feel free to let me know your thoughts in the bottom below. Tell me your favorites, your least favorites, why I'm wrong. Like, let me know. The thing with Star Wars is that we all have our opinions. They're always varied, they're always different, and they're all correct. There's no wrong opinion about Star Wars. You're entitled to your opinions. You're entitled to your thoughts, to your beliefs, to your feelings about it. I know people that they love the prequels. I know people that like the Disney versions. I know people that think that Rebels is the only good thing that ever came out of Star Wars. Like, there's a wide spectrum, and there's no wrong opinions. They're just different, and that's the thing that makes the fandom great, is it can be literally anybody with any type of opinion. But you have to remember, it's your opinion, and you need to respect your own opinion, but also respect the opinion of others, because just because you don't agree doesn't mean they're wrong. That's just my thoughts. Happy watching, happy reading. I will see you all next time. Bye.